So, hey Romeo, and welcome. Maybe we just start introducing ourselves for the audience. So, my name is Asa, and I'm director of Intercollege.
Thank you very much for inviting me. My name is Romeo. I am professor at Aalborg University Business School.
And thank you very much for coming. So when we were starting to make this course for NGO leaders and NGO managers, I thought right away that one interview that should be with you and to hear a little bit about what you're doing. And I'm very glad that you accepted the invitation to come and first of all, of course, share a little cognac, a passion that we have together. Cheers. So, but I know that you have had a long experience and a background within the NGO sector. And you're one of the few people that I know that have actually also tried to work with that experience in a theoretical context and trying to put some theoretical terms and concepts on the things that you have been doing. But maybe we just start with your story and the background. So I understand it starts after your PhD. You're coming back to Republic of Moldova.
Yes, thanks a lot. First of all, I saw the description of the course. Very interesting modules. So I think even with this paper and with the experience, I can contribute a lot, and I think it's very very useful course for starting up NGOs. The story started back in 2005. Indeed, when I finished my PhD, I came to Moldova. I wanted to relax, to have some free time after PhD, but I was asked by a friend of mine to take over her position as a CEO of a branch of international NGO. It's an English-based NGO that was about to start its activities in Chisinau, in Moldova. And I accepted, this is what I started in September 2005, my first meeting with my future employers, and discussed what NGO is all about, what it's going to do, and this is what was my starting point at that time.
Exactly. And you kind of established that local branch in Moldova, built it up, and created a success for this branch in Moldova.
Yes, we started in 2005, and we grew to maximum 3 people, 3.5, so to speak, right? We have a part-time accountant, and we're very small, but we're very successful and in what we're doing. And the NGO was about mitigating the relationship between legislators, members of the parliament, and business community. So for the purpose of informing members of the parliament about the economy, about different sectors of the economy, and so that they can be better informed when they create their legislation. Now, I speak freely and in a more knowledgeable way about what the NGO is all about, but when I started, I didn't have actually, idea what the NGO was about to do. So it took me a lot of time to actually learn about the NGO.
Yeah, exactly. And if we just try to then roll up the time till, I think it was last year, where you actually published an autobiographic paper on the whole experiences, those 10, 15 years back in time, and trying in a bird-eye perspective to look at what was it actually that happened there. And that's exactly the paper I would like to dig a little bit into and to hear from you. What kind of observations when you 15 years later were sitting and looking at the processes that happened that time, what kind of observation is it that catched your eyes?
Well, the paper is rooted theoretically in 2 major concepts, in the concept of legitimation and capabilities. From the capabilities perspective, the concern, what I was experienced and what theory talks about, is that organizations, young organizations especially, they need to nurture 2 types of capabilities, dynamic and substantive. Substantive capabilities means that you know what to do or how to do things. Dynamic capability means that you know how to change what you know what to do. And sometimes they're very distinctive, and sometimes the lack of one of those, especially of dynamic capabilities, may stifle the growth of the organization, because most of the time people come with the experience and knowledge of knowing how to do things, but sometimes the lack of knowing how to change things, inhibits the growth of the organization. This is one thing. From the legitimation perspective, the challenge was to sell yourself to different stakeholders so that they can accept you as a legitimate player in the market, which was Moldova, the non-for-profit sector. And it was a bit difficult because when you are an established organization going to an established market, then the challenge in terms of legitimation is how to maintain the status quo. Mm-hmm. If you're an established organization going to a new sector, then you're concerned about capacity building. Mm-hmm. In my case, I was a new organization going into an existing market. When you're going to a new completely market, new organization, the challenge is completely different, because at that time it's not only you have to be different and legitimate yourself in a completely new sector of the economy. So this means you have to jump, so what I call here in the paper crossing the gulf, meaning that you have to jump from almost nothing to something. That's the biggest challenge. In the case of my NGO, the challenge was to enter as a new organization to existing market. And then the key question is, how do you fit in? Mm. How do you fit in the current legal environment, institutional environment? How you fit in with existing stakeholders? Mm.
And how do you complement them?
Oh, yeah, exactly. And in my case, I had completely different three stakeholders. My main client was legislators, members of the parliament. My other stakeholders were business community, and the other key stakeholder was the international community, like donor organization, embassies, and so on and so forth. And when I entered the market as a new organization to existing markets, so trying to fit in, I realized that approaching different stakeholders require completely different strategies. Mm-hmm. So you have to develop different strategic activities to legitimate yourself in the eyes of these major stakeholders.
Mm. And one activity addressing one stakeholder is not necessarily sufficient to legitimate your existence towards another stakeholder. So it's about legitimation strategies targeting each of those central stakeholders that you have.
Exactly, that's right. For example, when I met my employers, when they explained me what the organization is all about, I asked them, what is the mission of the organization? Mm. They said, we are an educational resource. We're here to provide knowledge and experience and educate members of the parliament to become better members of the parliament. Well, this strategy didn't work with members of the parliament, because when they ask me who you are, what you're here for, when I say, well, I'm here to educate you, for some reasons it didn't work. Right, so I had to change the strategy to what I found, that empowering is the better message, better legitimation strategy. So this is what I did. I said, I'm here to empower you. I said, how? I said, well, I'm here to empower you through a better dialogue, a transparent dialogue with members of the community, so that you learn more about the new sectors, existing sectors, the changes are needed, and so on. So this is what worked well. When I approached the business community and the international community, the initial message of education worked best, because they realized that yes, the members of the parliament and parliament as an institution needs a lot of capacity building, a lot of support to become a more modern, a better body to answer to the current challenges in the sector.
And talking about the legitimacy of the NGO. You are also somewhere here in the paper talking a little bit about the challenges that you are facing when you kind of are opening a branch of another organization and kind of coming with their value set and with their strategy, but have to fit into the local market that you are acting on. Maybe you could put a few words on that.
Yes, it was very, the local NGO was established for many years, so Moldova has lots of NGO, different types. We came with a bit of different types of organizing. So it was not present in the law. So it was very interesting to sit sometimes with the clerks in the Ministry of Justice, deputies, sometimes with the minister, to actually go line by line, in the NGO charter to understand what to write, so that they're not going to change the law just for one NGO, right? So that was one example of how you need to adjust your organization, even the charter, to local environment. Another example was the mother organization developed a code of conduct. Yeah. So it was applied to all organizations, all its branches all over Europe and internationally. And when I used that code of conduct, and then when I started developing, implementing new activities, I realized that those points in that point of conduct were not enough to explain the specificity of the market. So on those, I think it was 9 or 8 bullet points on the code of conduct, I added about 8 footnotes explaining the other 9 bullet points to exemplify the specificity of the market, and then take as a point of departure the operating environment of the mother organization and to adjust it to the local environment.
Exactly. Maybe I'm jumping a little bit around, but there is a point in your paper where you talk about something you call the unsophisticated uncertainty. It was that term intrigued me. Maybe you can tell me a little bit about what is this uncertainty? Why is it unsophisticated, and why is it something that you found important to discuss from your experience?
Well, it came from the association with high tech. When you have a high technology, unknown product, and it's difficult to predict its applicability, its use. Sometime at the initial stage, when there's a high degree of newness and related uncertainty, then the impact of that technology can have even a negative social impact. So the same is here. It took me, I think, about 6 months or something to understand, what the organization is all about. And this is what I call uncertainty, because I couldn't grasp what the organization is about. And this is where the legitimacy comes in. In here, I talk about the 2 types of legitimacy. One is cognitive, and another social political. Yeah. Social political is easy in the sense that it's about the value organization brings. That's why when I said about the strategy selling to the members of the parliament, it was easy to sell the idea about the organization because they could buy it. So it's I'm here to empower, or if I would invite members of the business community to be being members of the organization, I would say, I'm here to educate members of the parliament. So they could see very quickly the value, social politically, that I could bring. When it came to cognitive, meaning that understanding the business and understanding what it takes to succeed, that was a bit more difficult. So for me personally, it was difficult to understand what the organization is about. What do I need to do specifically in terms of even activities to understand how to make a success? And another example is that when I started approaching businesses to say, okay, would you become a member in my organization, a PE member, so that could develop joint activities? One entrepreneur I approached through my networks, and one entrepreneur said, okay, 500 euros is not much, to pay annually for the fee. That's okay, but tell me what you do. I had to be frank. I said, listen, I still try to figure out what I'm doing. But the only thing I can say is that we try to build a better bridge between members of the parliament and business community. Then he said, okay, I'm giving you right now 500 euros, but next day if you come, you better be able to explain what you're doing, otherwise I'll give you more money. So this is what I mean by unsophisticated uncertainty, is that on one side, you understand the value of the organization, of what, if you again bring the knowledge with high technology, the concept, what brings to the market this NGO brings. On the other hand, I had difficulty understanding conceptually what the business is about and what it takes to succeed, to become success in that regard. And this is what I call unsophisticated uncertainty. On one sense, it's uncertainty, but not to a degree.
Yeah, and I guess that that even though it's not new products you come with in the market, even though there are similar existing, I think this with the cognitive legitimacy is an issue for many people who are starting up.
Yeah, and that's true. And this is where the going back to the substantive and dynamic capability. The assumption is that those who come with experience and knowledge, i.e., with substantive capability, they know how to do things. Right, but they might not know how to change things. In my case, it was a bit different. I was confident with dynamic abilities. I've been 5 years in the Russian army, so I know how to change things, right? So I was comfortable with dynamic abilities. However, when it came to substantive, knowing how to do things, knowing how to implement, how to develop things, to make it work, that was I didn't have. So I had to learn that. So that was a bit of different in many cases. However, the assumption is that most new organizations would come with more substantive around dynamic capabilities, for them to grow.
Yeah, but I think that a common advice, if we should try to do that is to get started and just jump into it.
Yes.
And maybe to embrace this uncertainty.
Yes, indeed. To overcome this uncertainty, I had to implement first activities and just by trial and error see what works and what doesn't work. And this is what we've done. Our first public hearing was on medicine in medical sector. The hearing was led by the chairman at that time, I think, Buliga. She was the head of the committee in the parliament, and then we had members of the community in medical sector, and then at that time they were trying to improve the law on medicine, and it was interesting to observe dynamics, and based on that we developed, and not only about on that, we implemented the second hearing, another hearing, and some other activities, and this led us to develop our internal, different from the mother organization, different operating procedures when it came to public hearings, company attachments, and other activities.
You talk somewhere also about funding sources, and this about diversifying funding sources for NGO and the importance of a diversified feeding of the organization. Maybe you could put a few words on that.
Yeah. When I signed the employment contract and we signed the charter of the organization, although the charter was independently, legally independent organization from the mother organization. But when we signed the contract, part of the agreement was that over 3 years, the funding from the headquarters will diminish to zero, and then over these 3 years, I have to increase the funding locally. And I started to look at what type of sources exist, and identified 4 major sources of funding. Of course, the easiest one was from headquarters, but that will disappear in 3 years. So at least this will give some time us to figure out what to do. Then the mother organization also and its headquarters had paid membership by companies. We developed that, and then we were successful to have about 10 to 15 companies, paying annual fee. So that was, I would say, easy, but we also developed activities to support them in different ways. And then the other type of activity we've learned was that due to the nature of our business, that we're impartial, neutral, non-lobbying organization that will just facilitate the dialogue. Then a lot of international donors like embassies, OSCE, EBRD, World Bank, they found USAID found very attractive to have us to mitigate this process. But by the nature of their funding, they would fund all operating activities. So we had to be innovative in a sense to come up with activities where they would come up or fund operating activities of the activity. So that was one source of funding, so which quite helped us a lot. Then donor funding. We organized, for example, a 2-day international conference on border management, and we had sponsors from OECD, from the World Bank, from in-kind, even from hotels. So this kind of. So I think it's about being innovative and creative about these funding sources. And of course, one which is very attractive but very laborious and time-consuming is, as you all know, is applying for projects to European. We tried once, but we're not successful, so we never pursued that. But these two major funding were left as the basic sources of revenue, which is company membership, and then ad hoc funding based on the activities funded by the local international community.
Now, we have talked about legitimacy, we have talked about funding, we have talked about this about the uncertainty and handling the uncertainty and the cognitive legitimacy. When can you, is there a kind of point, is there a kind of indicator when you can say, okay, now we can consider our organization as established, or this is a threshold for kind of building the legitimacy of our organization?
Yeah, there is, in here I mentioned so-called legitimation or legitimacy threshold.
Yes.
Basically, it's a point where you feel that you don't longer need to engage in activities or legitimation activities because you're already recognized. And when we realized that, when we saw companies coming to us seeking our support to facilitate certain activities. So it's no longer that we go to companies to come to us and say, okay, we'd like to be a PE member, we'd like you to facilitate this and this process. And then members of the parliament would come to us and say, okay, I'm interested in this law or maybe in this sector, I'd like to learn more about, can you facilitate this process? And also international donor community, also USAID, even after we stopped our activities in 2009 because of that riot in the parliament and the presidency palace. Even 1 year after that, USAID would come and say, okay, are you there? Knock are you there? Can you help us? In the sense that already we're recognized as an organization that will facilitate in a neutral, non-corrupt, non-lobby way this dialogue, and then this is what we achieved, I think, by 2008, by then 2007, early 2008.
So if we should try to simplify it, you can say that you as an NGO are working to legitimate your own activity and your own existence. You're working until a point where other people, other stakeholders, they come to you in order to legitimize their activities.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So we're no longer, beyond this point, we started already developing other type of strategies, developing more activities already tailored to specific customers, clients like members of the parliament, business community, and international donor organizations, based on their interests that are coming to us. Before that, we're trying to create certain things that we're not sure whether they like it or not, where they will fit in the agenda, and we had to persuade them to engage. After that point, it was the other way around. And you're right, at some point, and we have to be very careful with this, because especially during the election campaigns, either local or national, because this could be also part of the legitimation efforts campaign, and this is where we had to draw a line sometime. So we had to stop our activities for 1 or 2 months until the election is over, because we didn't want to use our organization as a promotion tool, because we're a political organization.
Exactly. Now, here in the end, I would like to hear if you had in front of you a young person who had the intention of starting up an NGO. What advices would you give such a young, aspiring NGO leader to start it with?
Well, first of all, uncertainty is not something that we should be afraid of, and lack of resources today doesn't mean that the resources are not there to grasp. So it's a matter of knowing what you'd like to do, understanding exactly your mission, and finding ways to access those resources. Knocking on the door, enhancing or enlarging your network, that helps tremendously. Getting right people for the job in the organization, and perseverance towards that mission. And of course, watching for that threshold, because at some point the success will come. Okay, not success, recognition. We didn't have success at the time, but recognition, success came later. But recognition, so just patience until that threshold is passed.
Okay, so get started, go do it, embrace the uncertainty,
Exactly.
and try, fail, and learn from those
Yeah,
failures.
that's true.
All right. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
the mail.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
Thank you.